Stories of an Aircraft Builder. In this episode I'll show you some of the short articles and reports that have been published over time about the loan of my aircraft to Australia. There are a lot more here, but they all essentially have the same content. The distribution of the notes over the years is interesting. That gives you an idea of how long it can take until an aircraft like this is finally allowed to take to the air. Most of it is spent on bureaucracy efforts. You know, it can't fly until the paperwork is correct. Some of you may already know that rotary engines were made in New Zealand by Tony Whitenberg and his excellent company Classic Aero Machining Services, or CAMS. What is less known is, however, that my Engels E4, that is the Fokker E3, was given the first rotary engine built by him, which was commissioned by Andrew Carter at TAVAS especially for this project. The engine still powers the aircraft today. Flypast of March 2013 wrote, Andrew Carter's DR1 will soon be joined by 3 more Fokker types, by John Parker. Fokker Trio Australia bound. Plans to celebrate the centenary of World War I in Australia have had a great boost thanks to a unique cooperation between a German craftsman and the recently founded aviation heritage organization. The Australian Vintage Aviation Society, or TAVAS, aims to foster interest in the earliest years of flying on the continent and its military past. TAVAS has a sub with pub under construction, and the Fokker DR1 triplane has been imported from the USA. TAVAS founding director Andrew Carter, owner of the DR1, has negotiated with Achim Engels, renowned German builder of World War I reproductions, to bring a trio of Fokkers, an E3 monoplane, D7 biplane and D8 parasol, to Australia. Each of the replicas is being constructed to an exceptional standard at a workshop at Weschenbeuren, Germany. Achim is placing the trio on long-term loan to TAVAS. The machines will be returned to him in flying condition in 2030. The D8 is the closest to flight, only requiring the fitting of an engine, and will be the first that TAVAS will have flying down under. The E3 and D7 will follow later. More information can be found on the TAVAS website at www.tavas.com.au. John Parker. Another article written by John Parker appeared in Aeroplane Monthly in April 2013. First World War imports to Oz. The Australian Vintage Aviation Society was due to take delivery of 3 First World War Fokker replicas at its Caboolture, Queensland base during February. The fighters, a Fokker E3 Eindecker, a D7 and D8, are on a 17-year loan from Achim Engels, which is based at Weschenbeuren in southern Germany. Airline pilot Andrew Carter, who formed the Australian Vintage Aviation Society, or TAVAS, at the start of 2012 to foster interest in the earliest years of flying in Australia, recently imported a Fokker DR1 from the USA. The E3, D7 and D8 have been constructed by Engels' Fokker team Schorndorf and are largely complete but require some work before they will fly. The D8 is the closest to flight, only needing the installation of a power plant, while the other 2 still require some construction covering and finishing. TAVAS has responsibility for sourcing and fitting engines, and work is ongoing to obtain and fit suitable power plants to operate the machines. During January, an agreement for the supply of a 100 horsepower Gnome rotary was signed with the Classic Aero Machining Services in Blenheim, New Zealand. Other engine options range from original Mercedes and the almost unobtainable Oberursel units to more modern but similarly configured motors such as the Ranger and Gypsy. Achim Engels and his team are well known for the superb workmanship of their First World War German aircraft reproductions. Among their previous projects is an Oberursel-powered Fokker D8, registered as Zulu Kilo Foxtrot Echo Victor, which is flown from Masterton, New Zealand, by the world's premier operator of First World War aircraft, the Vintage Aviator Limited. Achim has now decided to discontinue the production of aircraft for customers, and any built in the future will be for his own use. The 3 Fokkers will be returned to Germany in 2030. Up to now, there have been very few First World War aircraft operating in Australia. With the First World War centenary now fast approaching, TAVAS will help bring constructors and owners of aircraft and enthusiasts together to present display flying examples to the public on a regular basis, and to educate them about the period in aviation history. Andrew Carter commented, "Achim's generosity has given us the chance to bring accurate reproductions to the Australian public and demonstrate these aircraft as they were almost 100 years ago. We will operate the E3, D7 and D8 aircraft alongside our DR1 and Sopwith Pup." Warbird News of 29th of April 2030 wrote, "Trio of World War I Fokker reproductions head down under." With the centenary of the First World War fast approaching, the Australian Vintage Aviation Society, TAVAS, has announced that in addition to their recently acquired Fokker DR1, which is almost ready to fly, they have reached an agreement with Achim Engels of Fokker Team Schorndorf, the world's premier builder of reproduction World War I aircraft, for TAVAS to take long-term possession of 3 reproduction Fokkers, an E3, D7 and a D8. Each of the planes has been meticulously crafted and are nearly complete. The terms of the long-term loan agreement stipulates that TAVAS complete the planes to an airworthy standard and display them at flying events in Australia, with the craft being returned in flying condition to Achim in Germany in 2030. The D8 is the most complete aircraft, only missing an engine, and will be the first aircraft TAVAS will have flying. The E3 and D7 will take a little longer as they still require some construction, engine and instruments covering and finishing, says TAVAS founding director Andrew Carter. "I knew Achim was capable of out-of-the-box thinking, but this has taken even me by surprise. His generosity has given us the chance to bring accurate World War I reproductions to the Australian public and demonstrate these aircraft as they were almost 100 years ago. We will operate his new aircraft alongside our Fokker DR1 and Sopwith Pup." The TAVAS own website published the following. The Australian Vintage Aviation Society. Achim Engels. Achim Engels has built a reputation for himself worldwide with a lifelong obsession and dedication to study and building Fokker reproductions. As a teenager, he started his first Fokker DR1, and that is now in the Technical Museum of Speyer on the Rhine. Just a quick note, see episode 7 of this series for a detailed story about that if you're interested in. In the past, Achim has built aircraft for himself and for others, but due to a change of circumstances now only builds for himself. He had several unfinished projects at his premises which led to a unique opportunity for TAVAS to present them here in Australia. Under the agreement, Achim has sent 3 of his reproduction Fokker aircraft to TAVAS on long-term loan to complete to airworthy standard and display at flying events in Australia. The aircraft are an E3 Eindecker, D7 and D8. These aircraft will be returned to Germany in 2030. These 3 aircraft will complement the DR1 and together will represent a complete set of the most significant Fokker aircraft from World War I. The span of the types is significant given that they represent the first to last of the Fokker service fighters of World War I. These are incredibly accurate reproductions, built just as they were almost a century ago. The quality of workmanship and detail in each of these aircraft has to be seen to be believed. Achim's generosity has given TAVAS the chance to bring accurate World War I reproductions to the Australian public and demonstrates these aircraft as they were almost 100 years ago. In June 2015, another Aeroplane Monthly report followed. The TAVAS World War I fleet grows. The Australian Vintage Aircraft Society, TAVAS, is rapidly expanding its collection of World War I aircraft at Caboolture Airfield in Queensland. With the addition of a Bristol F-2B fighter replica from New Zealand and completion of the most authentic Fokker E3 Eindecker replica to have been built. Construction of the Fokker was begun by Achim Engels in his workshop in Schorndorf, southern Germany, using as many original drawings as could be found and replicating period construction techniques and materials. The only deviance from authenticity is the use of approved aviation epoxy instead of the casein glues of the day. The fabric was manufactured in Belgium by the same family-run business that made the same great fabric a century ago. Unlike previous E3 replicas, the Caboolture machine will fly with power from a rotary engine. At Classic Aero Machining Services camps in Blenheim, Tony Whitenberg has reverse engineered a 100 horsepower GNOME monosuperb, stripping an original unit and generating CAD drawings in order to build an exact copy. The 9-cylinder 100 horsepower Oberursel U1 rotary fitted to the original E3 was based on that GNOME engine. The Fokker has been painted as an example flown from Gallipoli by Hans-Joachim Boudicke during the Turkish campaign, during which he scored 4 confirmed victories. Boudicke reached a total of 13 victories before being killed during an aerial combat with Sopwith Camels over Lens, North France on 10th March 1918. The F-2B replica Zulu Kilo Juliet November uniform arrived at Caboolture on 9th March. It was previously owned by the Vintage Aviator Limited and based at Omaka. Originally built by Ed Storrow in Oregon, it first flew in 1993 as November 624, going to New Zealand in 2001. Now owned by local collector Jack MacDonald, it will be operated by TAVAS. Its serial will be changed to Bravo 1229er to present an aircraft flown by Captain Ross Macpherson Smith of No. 1 Squadron, Australian Flying Corps in Egypt. Smith scored 11 victories and during November-December 1919, flying a Vickers Vimy with his brother Keith, made the first flight from the UK to Australia. The German magazine Flugzeug Classic wrote in 2015, Fokker E3, flying like 100 years ago. On May 5th, Andrew Carter took off with the Fokker E3 monoplane from TAVAS, Ingalls, from Caboolture Airfield in Queensland on 3 short flights. The aircraft took off very quickly, after just over 30 meters, and showed good climb performance. Carter reported that during his 5-minute circuit, the rudder control was not noticeable and the one-piece elevator was extremely sensitive. Just a side note here. Note that this is an article that was published in Classic Wings first and was translated by the German aviation magazine Flugzeug Classic. Obviously this sentence was an error in translation, since it should read that the rudder is sufficient. Turning by twisting the wings, however, was incredibly effective. Even slight pressure on the control stick and rudder bar enabled a balanced turn. When turning in for final approach, switching the engine on and off, the so-called blipping, was the only way to control the speed during the descent. The GNOME rotary engine, reverse engineered by Tony Whitenberg in Omaka, New Zealand, is a great engine with a simple fuel lever for control, which is adjusted immediately after ignition. Flying this authentic replica was a unique and enjoyable experience of what flying really felt like 100 years ago. Early Aero of March 2nd, 2016. TAVAS Fokker D8 nearing its flight. The Australian Vintage Aviation Society's TAVAS Fokker D8 replica is one step closer to performing its first flight, with the organization's report that the aircraft has received its final fuel calibration and that its authentic compass and tachometer are now in working order. The aircraft was constructed by noted World War I aircraft builder Achim Engels and is on long-term loan to TAVAS along with his Fokker E3 and D7. The machine is fitted with an original 160 horsepower Gnome rotary engine that was sold as surplus after World War I and fitted to an airboat, being run a limited number of times and preserved in excellent condition. The D8's final inspection is expected to be completed by mid-March. TAVAS, based at Caboolture, Queensland, has a growing collection of early aircraft including a Bristol F-2B, Fokker DR-1, SE-5A and a 1909 Johnson monoplane. The organization recently completed work on the Engels E3, fitting it with a newly manufactured 100 horsepower Gnome rotary engine. The aircraft performed its maiden flight last June. And again, the German magazine Flugzeug Klassik wrote in 2016, Fokker D8. Fokker flies. No April Fool's joke. On April 1st, 2016, the founder of the Australian Vintage Aviation Society, TAVAS, Andrew Carter, took off for the first time with the Fokker D8. The aircraft, registered Victor Hotel Echo India Victor, is an exact replica that TAVAS received 3 years ago, albeit without engine and instruments and only on loan from German Achim Engels. Together with the D8, an already flown E3 and the D7 that had not yet been tested in the air also arrived at the Australian club. The aim is to return all 3 aircraft to Germany in airworthy condition in 2030. The D8 was given the serial number 730-10 and is powered by an original rotary engine from 1918. Carter's overall assessment is good. In his opinion, for example, the controls respond very well, but they are smoother compared to most smaller aircraft. In addition, the aircraft is exceptionally easy to handle and can exceed its never-exceed velocity at 110 knots or 203 kilometers at full power in level flight easily. This is why pilots perform all level flight or descent phases at half engine power or less. The stall speed of the fighter is 36 knots, which is 67 kilometers per hour, and the aerodynamically excellent design requires that during landing, even at 1/8 power, the engine must be turned off to reduce speed for a safe touchdown. The pilot must allow the aircraft to roll out completely during all landings, as the very rudimentary elastic suspension has virtually no give. It is also necessary to keep the fighter horizontal until the speed is reduced to such an extent that the tail automatically lowers. There are neither brakes nor a steerable tail wheel, only a rigid skid. Therefore, you have to try to keep the machine straight until it comes to a stop by itself. And then there were some model magazines also that reported about it all. One of these articles is the following, published in Scale Matters by John Amarego. Fokker D8 Part 2. Note there must be Part 1 also, but I don't have that one. As mentioned in the last edition of Scale Matters, we headed up to Caboolture Airfield to the Australian Vintage Aviation Society, TAVAS, Great War Flying Display over the 21st and 22nd April 2018. We had a fantastic time and both the flying and static displays were really outstanding. The team at TAVAS have been working very hard and they have all really good collection of historic aircraft and fly them for the crowd's pleasure. The highlight for us was seeing Achim Engels' Fokker D8. Achim Engels has a worldwide reputation for studying and building the finest World War I replicas of German aircraft. Achim has loaned the D8 along with an E3 Eindecker and a D7 to TAVAS for flying and display purposes. These aircraft are under a loan agreement and will be returned to Germany in 2030. The centenary reenactment of von Richthofen being shot down was a tribute to this fine pilot. The demonstration consisted of a full-size red Fokker DR-1 in aerial combat with the Bristol F-2B, along with ground troops dressed in full World War I uniforms, shooting at the Fokker. The flying display with the Bristol F-2B fled out alongside the F-18, with only 100 years separating them, was an outstanding comparison of technical progress. The museum is also well worth a look, but was closed due to the number of aircraft participating in the aerial displays and ground run-ups for the crowd. It is a real experience to watch, hear and smell a running World War I rotary engine. This so far. There were more, but basically all the same way. As you noticed, the last one is in this row is of 2018. This, however, does not mean that we are now in that year with our stories of an aircraft builder. Don't worry, there happened a few things in between, which I will cover in future episodes. So, stay tuned.